November 24th, 1939. In many conflicts throughout history, one side has managed to gain the upper hand, at least temporarily, with a secret new weapon or device. But the thing is, secret weapon loses a lot of its value and it's no longer a secret. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, the French approved a new battle plan in case Germany attacked through Belgium. Chinese battle plans suffered a setback when the Japanese attacked them in the south, and Winston Churchill warned of Hitler's new secret weapon. That weapon is the magnetic mine, whose construction I talked about last week. The magnetic mines continue wreaking havoc this week after being dropped into British coastal waters by plane, and they are indiscriminate in their sinkings. On the 19th, for example, they sink 5 merchant ships, 2 British, 1 French, 1 Swedish, 1 Italian. The following day, a minesweeper is blown up during a sweep. The British had some really good luck the 22nd. A magnetic mine lands in coastal mudflats and is just sitting intact in the mud. Lieutenant Commanders John Ulvery and Roger Lewis and their team, having removed all metal from their persons, disarm it. Actually, they shouldn't have been able to do that. The crew of the plane was supposed to set a sensor before dropping the mine. The sensor activates 7 seconds after the mine hits ground. Any jolt after that blows the mine. The crew of the plane must have been in too much of a hurry to escape the anti-aircraft fire all around them to set the sensor. So now begins the feverish work to devise some sort of a countermeasure. There are really 2 ways to approach a weapon like a magnetic mine. You can try to destroy it before it finds a target, or you can try to make the target invisible to the mine. Charles Goodeve and his department were going to investigate both of them. Goodeve is a Canadian lecturer in physical chemistry who is also a lieutenant commander in the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve. He will be responsible for developing the double L sweep. This uses a strong pulsed current between long cables that are towed behind wooden hull ships. This in turn creates a field strong enough to blow up mines within the area. By February, this will be a standard practice for removing coastal mines. As for making ships invisible, magnetic mines work because metal ships' hulls concentrate the Earth's magnetic field. In the northern hemisphere, the end pole down, and the mine reacts. The term de-gaussing would soon be coined by Goodeve for the process of decreasing or eliminating the ship's magnetic field, various methods of which the Admiralty worked on. He called this de-gaussing because the Germans used the word Gauss, itself from the physicist Carl Friedrich Gauss, as the unit of strength for the magnetic fields in the triggers of the mines. How de-gaussing originally worked was by coiling, which was simply putting electromagnetic coils on ships to create a small end pole up field so the ship had the same field as the background. The problem with this is that it would be way too expensive to outfit all the ships that needed it. Goodeve would eventually, months in the future, come up with wiping or deperming, which just dragged a large electrical cable with a strong pulse alongside a ship. Wiping would achieve a similar result as coiling, albeit not permanent, so it would have to be repeated on a schedule. But that is in the future. There is plenty of action at sea in the present. On the 21st, the destroyer HMS Gypsy is lost to a mine leaving Harwich. The same day, the brand new British cruiser Belfast is badly damaged by a mine in the Firth of Forth. The day before, Hitler issued new directives to his armed forces commanders with details of the attack on Belgium and the Netherlands. He thinks Holland will offer little or no resistance, so it will be more of a peaceful invasion. The German Navy will still blockade both coasts. On the 23rd, between Iceland and the Faroe Islands, the British merchant ship Rawalpindi, with 4 6-inch guns, meets Germany's Scharnhorst and is blown out of the water. Scharnhorst has been traveling with Gneisenau and heads back towards Germany. Over the next few days, they evade many British ships searching for them and make it back to base. This is helped by the Germans being able to read the British naval codes. In a speech to his generals on the 23rd, Hitler says Britain will be forced to her knees by the U-boat and the mine. He even calls a stop to rocket development at Peenemünde. He thinks the victory over Poland shows that he does not need them to win the war. And Germany continues to organize its gains. By now, the general government in occupied Poland was actively taking measures to separate the Jews from the rest of the population. For example, when the Jews expelled from the town Siecz reached Warsaw, the locals saw that they had been forced to sew a yellow patch on their lapel with the word Jew on it. Warsaw educationalist Chaim Kaplan, whose diaries survived the war, though he would not, suggested adding the words, "my pride." He was told that counts as sabotage, and that condemns you to death. On the 23rd, Governor Hans Frank announces that henceforth all Jews in the whole region over the age of 10 must wear a white armband marked with the yellow Star of David on the right arm of their visible clothing. In Warsaw, the star would be blue. Failure to do this will result in imprisonment. But there were worse punishments for other things. After a Jew living at 9 Nalewski Street killed a Polish policeman, 53 Jewish inhabitants of that address were executed. Okay, to be fair, the German authorities offered to ransom the 53, but when the Warsaw Jewish Council raised and handed the money over, they were told that the Jews had already been shot. The money was not returned. This was, in fact, the first mass killing of Jews in Warsaw of the war. German General Petzel, shocked by such a scene, wrote a report that reached Hitler that stated that the SS and the Gestapo were carrying out public shootings in most localities. The selection of the victims was arbitrary and the conduct disgusting. You can imagine that this report had little effect. And there was a further occupation in progress far to the east. On the 23rd, the Japanese captured Nanning, the capital of Guangxi province in southern China. This cuts off the road by which the Chinese can get supplies from French Indochina. The Chinese, who now fall back to the mountains, minimized the importance of the cutting of the supply line, saying that they'd planned their communication system expecting the highway to someday be cut because of its proximity to the coast. And in the far north, what's going on with the Finns, who've refused to cede land to the Soviets, land the Soviets want because of its proximity to the coast? Well, by now, even though negotiations between the Finns and Soviets had broken down, there was a sense of relief beginning to come over the Finns. Nothing bad had happened, and the civilians who had evacuated the border regions were beginning to return. And anyhow, the popular mood was upbeat. Finland's cause was so self-evidently just that surely the Western democracies would step in to devastate the Russians if they tried an attack. Chair of the Defense Council, Carl Gustav Mannerheim, did not share this mood and said straight out that Stalin was not bluffing. And in spite of what they may have heard about the army purges, the Red Army was not to be trifled with. The politicians listened respectfully to Mannerheim, thanked him for his time, then left his office whispering among themselves that the marshal was too old, too gloomy, too afraid of Russia. In fact, Mannerheim had been warned by a sympathetic German attaché that if they did not reopen negotiations, that was it for Finland. Intelligence reported massive troop buildup around Leningrad and vague, not really confirmed reports of new roads and railroads being built that dead-ended in the Russian forest a few kilometers short of the Finnish border. On the 18th, Mannerheim told Finn's political leaders again to reopen negotiations, and the result was the same. He will plead with them again next week on the 26th, and when again they don't listen, he will resign his post, no longer willing to accept responsibility for the defense of Finland. And that was the week. Jews now forced to visibly identify themselves in Poland, a Japanese advance in southern China, and the German Navy ascendant even as its secret weapon is captured intact. And the Finns, well, the government anyhow, seeming to be stuck in a world of denial as to Soviet plans. It's hard to blame them. I mean, the idea of being invaded by a colossus like the USSR must be incredibly daunting, so why not try to avoid that thought? But considering that the Soviets recently invaded Poland and bullied the Baltics into accepting Soviet military presence and have been making demands on you for nearly 2 months, for how long can you avoid it? Eventually, you will have to face reality, and that could happen sooner than you may think. If you'd like to understand a bit more about how Stalin's expansionist ideas came to be the foreign policy of the Soviet Union, watch our Between Two Wars episode about Lenin's death and Stalin's rise to power on TimeGhost. You can find it right here. And if you have not already, join the TimeGhost army at Patreon or timeghost.tv. Our war effort needs you. See you next time.